Hello. Thank you for joining us for Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This is episode 27, and Dawn is going to be the guest. We're going to focus on the Blue Flower Curtain. It's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we will learn all about Dawn's experience and the process of writing the book. My name is Neil Parekh. That's my co-host, and actually we're going to change her title right now, live on air. She's not anymore today. She's the guest on the show. And we're so glad that you are joining us. If you're watching on replay, thank you very much for taking the time. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. We're live on Dawn's Facebook and Instagram and my Facebook and Instagram. Please like, comment, share, retweet. Let your friends know that we are hosting another show. This is our 27th show. We started last year in February. And wow, what a ride, Dawn, huh?
It has been. It has been such a ride. A great ride, though. A really great ride.
It has been a great ride. And just as a, just a preview for our next show, which is April 24th. So we're doing this show where I'm the host and Dawn's the guest. But then our next show, we're going to flip it, and I'll be the guest, and Dawn will be the host. So for episode 28, and we're going to talk about what I have learned about my own mental health over the last year plus of producing the show. So that should be a great conversation. It's going to be on the tail end of Sexual Assault Awareness Month and on the cusp of Mental Health Awareness Month. And we thought there was an appropriate bridge there. As folks may know, we started this show as a follow-up to a series of shows I produced with our good friend Candice Sanchez, focusing on male survivors of sexual abuse. And that was my story, and I shared that. But the mental health show really evolved from that. And so we're going to be kind of covering a little bit about both, but more focused on the mental health side on our next show. But Dawn, I want to do a quick reminder for folks of last week's show, because it was so meaningful. We had Jim Yu join us, former colleague of mine at United Way Worldwide, and he was talking about borderline personality disorder support for families. And I bring that up in particular because I was at a United Way event this week. I'm on the board for United Way Next, which is the alumni organization. And I was telling a colleague of mine had seen it on social media, a colleague of Jim and mine, but didn't get a chance to watch it. But she said she had read the blog post. And what was interesting is that she shared that her son also has borderline personality disorder. And she and Jim worked on the same team for a number of years before I joined. But it's not something that they had shared and talked about at the office. And she and I had a really great conversation, not just about borderline personality disorder, and she's definitely going to follow up with Jim and connect with him. And she was really encouraged to hear about the workshops because she didn't know about that. But I was also able to share my own mental health story with her, and she was very supportive. And it's what I said earlier on our last show, that I had been too embarrassed and too afraid to say to anyone that I saw a therapist or had issues with anxiety and depression. But here I am talking about it at receptions and cocktail hours and finding people who are showing nothing but love and support. Thank you, Dawn, for showing the way to doing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for saying that, Neil. Thank you so much. It's quite the journey, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So I want to make sure folks know we're going to be talking about Dawn's book, The Blue Flower Curtain, in just a few minutes. But first, just a quick hello to a few folks watching. Jim Neuburg is watching. He's the one with the Pepsi can for a profile picture, which is new. I just want to point out that's new. It's a recent development. But he is Dawn's husband, the guest's husband, in fact.
Yes.
And we have another author watching as well. I just mentioned her name a few minutes ago, Candice Sanchez. She's saying hello, author Dawn. And Candice, of course, is an author herself. And is so proud to know both of you. And I easily, if I'm not careful, I can just start bawling in a minute because of what the two of you have meant to me in over the last 3 years, really working with Candice before we started the show, and the work on both of your work on sexual assault awareness and Denim Day, and having these difficult conversations in public spaces. It's just been incredible. And Dawn says, "Love you both." Thank you, Dawn. We have
Candice was very, very instrumental in me publishing my book. Without her help, I don't know that that I would have gotten it done. She was pretty amazing. So thank you, Candice.
Yeah, I'm sure. Apollo is watching from Philadelphia. Glad to be here. Thank you, Apollo. Kate is watching. Love you, Dawn and Neil. So glad you're sharing the journey of your book with everyone tonight. And I'm thrilled that we're going to be talking about the book. The book came out in September, and we've referenced it several times on the show, but we haven't had a chance to have a proper conversation about it. So that happens tonight. Jonathan says hello from the East Village. So thank you, Jonathan. So let's dive right in and let's start talking about it. Before we get too far, I want to share with folks, just so folks know, if you're not familiar with the story, if there are, most of the folks who are commenting probably know, but if you don't know, the Blue Flower Curtain is a story about Dawn's violent rape at gunpoint 31 years ago. So we want to make sure folks are aware of that, in case that is going to bring up any concerns or issues. You're more than welcome to step away, to come back and watch this later if you need to be in a different place, a different headspace to do that. But I will say that what I think is equally important is that the book is as much a story about resilience and recovery, and the journey from survivor to thriver and advocate, than it is anything else. So it is thankfully not that Dawn's story has been written, and there's much more to be said about that over the next several years, but it really is a hopeful story and something that is uplifting. So with that, I just want to make sure people have some sense of what we're going to get into today. We often, and Dawn, I know we've talked about this, you and I make reference to sexual assault and your rape, my abuse, in a pretty, I don't want to say casual manner, but we're pretty comfortable talking about it. And at this point, and especially with people who are watching, many of whom we know. Often we get people we don't know watching the show. So I wanted to take that moment just to kind of level set for folks. When you've done several book talks now about the book in libraries and elsewhere. How do you start the conversation? What is the first thing that you open up with after the host or the person at the library said, "Okay, everyone, we're getting ready to start. Dawn, over to you."
Typically I do give a trigger warning so that people know and understand that the topic that we'll be talking about can be very upsetting for people. And then I just kind of will just kind of give a brief detail of what actually happened to me, which I will do right now. So I was 21 years old, and I had literally just gotten married. I wasn't married for more than a month at the time that this happened. Um, and my ex-husband and I were going to go to a party, but I was working that day. And so he had gone to the party early, and I was going to show up afterwards. And the oddest part about this is that we had been complaining about not getting enough exercise. And so I decided that I was going to walk to this party. It was right in my neighborhood where we were living. It was literally 5 blocks away. And so I decided I was going to walk. And as I was walking to this party, there were these 3 men that were standing, well, boys actually, that were standing on the porch of this young girl, having a conversation with her. And it's really odd because my instincts had me cross to the other side of the street, because I had this weird feeling or sensation. So I crossed to the other side of the street, and I started to kind of like walk a little faster. And I was really, really close to the house that I was supposed to be meeting my husband in. It was my friend's 25th birthday. And as I got up to the like stairs that lead up to their house, these boys started running after me and shouting. And before I could get to the door to ring the doorbell, they had stopped me at gunpoint. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And what's really shocking to me is it still gets me like every time, is that like after everything happened, they interviewed every neighbor, every person in the neighborhood, and nobody saw or heard anything, which was startling to me because they made me take my clothes off in the middle of the street. They dragged me to a car. They did all kinds of things that would have caused attention, but no one saw or heard anything, including all of these people that were in the house that I was standing in front of, where my friends and my husband were. So it was like a horrible set of circumstances to kind of how this all happened.
Now, Dawn, you said no one heard or saw anything. Did they actually not hear or see anything, or no one wanted to talk about it? No one wanted to come forward?
I don't know the answer to that. The only thing that I know is that they talked to every neighbor, and nobody said anything. Nobody said that they saw or heard anything. So I'll never know.
One of the things that's interesting about the book, and you write about it in your blog post as well, is as much as you are writing about your journey and your reflections and the experience, really what you did after the event, you really wanted to make sure you had all your facts right. You wanted to make sure that you were 100% authentic in terms of capturing at least what was known about the crime. So you read the court transcripts for there were multiple trials, and you
Correct.
read through. What was that process like? And even just as a basic question, like, where do you get the transcripts from? How do you do you have to physically go and sit in a room? Like, what happens with that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So because this happened to me so long ago, my transcripts are not on a computer. They are paper copies. And I I'm very lucky to work in an advocacy space where I could go to somebody that I knew who was a victim witness advocate and ask her, how do I get these transcripts? And so she actually ordered them for me. I had to go down to the courthouse. And unbeknownst to me, I couldn't just like take the transcripts. If I wanted any part of the transcript, I had to pay for it, which I find to be absolutely asinine. That I have to pay for my own story, like to be able to get copies
Yeah.
of my own story. And I mean, okay, so I get it. Paper costs money, and but in order for me to, and the transcripts were like this big, like there was like hundreds of pages in the transcripts. And so I didn't want the whole thing. I was really interested in like the trials and the courts and all of that. And so I sat down at a table. All they had was this really big table in this one room where everybody who had asked for transcripts of anything were all sitting around this table. And a lot of people, it was divorce proceedings or things like that. And I started reading through these transcripts and I was like, I can't do this at this table right now. Like I can't. So I paged through until I found really the transcripts. I wanted my mom's statement and my own statement, because as most people know, anytime you get up and talk in public, by the time you're done, you don't have any idea what you said, right?
Sure.
And I was really interested in reading like what I had actually said on that date, and what my mom had said, and really what the lawyers and the judges said. So I took those pages and I had them copy those pages, and I took them home, and I slowly began to read through them, and it was an experience. It was an absolute experience.
Now, when you went in to read them, you were alone?
I was. I was.
Was that intentional or
Um, I don't, it's so odd because I don't think that I realized the intensity of what I was doing until I was like walking into the courthouse. And then I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I can do this. And I just remember like my hands were shaking when I grabbed the papers. They were just shaking so hard. But my friend had gotten these transcripts for me and I was like, no, I really want to honor my story and my book to the best of my knowledge. So I'm going to do this. So I don't know that I even thought to bring somebody along with me. I just thought, I'm going to go pick these up and everything's going to be great. And it was very emotional for me.
I can only imagine. One of the things that we could have started with, particularly when we put the cover on, is just to explain a little bit more of the story. You talked about going to this party and these young boys, not quite Ben, they were all teenagers, right? They were 14 to 16 or 18.
Yeah, they were
Somewhere in that range?
13,
13.
15, and 17. Mhm.
That's right. Somewhere
Yeah.
in there. So explain, explain why the title is The Blue Flower Curtain, and how does that
Yes.
work into your story?
Yeah. So part of my biggest struggle was figuring out what I was going to title it. I had absolutely no idea. And I actually went and gave a talk to a bunch of high school students um, several years back around talking about Denim Day, which we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But Denim Day is a day to honor survivors, and I was talking to them about Denim Day, and I explained that after the rape was over, I was, I mean, the when the boys left, they thought that I had died. And so I laid there for a while before I moved because I was afraid that they were going to come back and shoot me again. And so when I finally had the courage to move, I knew that I knew I was injured and I knew I needed help. And so I kind of like crawled my way. I was in an alley and I crawled my way from behind this alley, and I was like looking at all these houses that were like right across the street, trying to figure out whose door I was going to go knock on, because I was pretty much terrified at that point. And but I knew I needed help. I was naked. I didn't have any clothes. I was hurt. And I was just in bad shape. And across the street from where I was, there was a window, a kitchen window. And in the window, there were these blue flower curtains. And in my head, I thought, a woman has to live at this house. If there are these blue flower curtains in the window, a woman has to live at this house. And my best hope at that moment was that somebody would answer the door that was a woman. And that's exactly what happened. And she was my saving grace. She was my absolute saving grace.
So the blue flower curtain, is it something that from, so for when the incident happens and the book traces your evolution, your recovery, but over the last 2 years or so, 3 years, when you've been thinking about the book and writing the book, how present has this image been for you? This idea, the memory of the blue flower curtain, is it something that you've been thinking about for 30 years? Or as you started writing the book and you started thinking about, well, I need to come up with a title and maybe something for the cover. Oh yeah, I remember I saw that curtain. That would be cool. Like, how does it fit in your kind of your life over the last 30 years?
It is, I'm gonna get emotional. It's a big factor. It's been a part of like who I am since right after this happened. Like, the kindness of that woman and the way that she treated me with such respect and dignity, when this like naked, injured young woman showed up at her door, that she could have just like, I don't know, she could have said no, she could have not opened her door, she could have not helped me. And she ran into her bedroom and grabbed a robe for me and gave me a glass of water. And those two gestures by this woman, it was just something else. So that blue flower curtain in that window represents like the beginning of me being a survivor of a very, very brutal crime. And so it sticks with me all the time. And I have to say, I don't know about you, but the cover of that book is just absolutely stunning to me. And
Yes.
it was done by a woman that I went to high school with, and she did it pro bono for me. And I basically described what my vision was of the cover of my book, and she brought it to life. And I absolutely, every time I see the front of that book, it brings me all kinds of feelings, mostly feelings of being very grateful.
It is incredible, and just the artwork. Hopefully, people, you can see it on the screen. If you're just listening, if you're doing other things, but listening to the conversation, it's a white curtain with blue flowers on branches in the background, with the words "the blue flower curtain" in a nice script, but what your eye is drawn to a pencil drawing of a woman on the floor, uh, naked, but hunched over, bent over at the waist. So her torso is fully kind of down over her legs. You can't see her face. You see hair over her head. It's just very powerful, particularly when you know the story, when you understand why um, you chose this. Um, it is really great. I'll share. I'll let folks know, and I've mentioned this a few times, that I had the chance to read the book over winter break when we were in Connecticut for the holidays, and I, except for like 20 pages, I read, and then came back to it. I read the rest of it in one sitting. I was completely drawn in, and even though I knew your story, I knew the outlines, it was still incredibly gripping, incredibly emotional to see the detail, to see your tracing your journey. And I love the way that you wrote the book, where it jumped back and forth in time. A little bit of a snippet of the event itself, and then something from a few years later, and then back to the event and the aftermath, and then more of your recovery. I mean, that was a really great technique.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question about. Sorry, Dawn. I'm going to ask you a question about that technique in just a moment, but I do want to share a few other comments from folks who are watching, particularly Cynthia Martin. Can't wait to get my copy of your story. It's so powerful. You are amazing. Sorry, not Cynthia. Serena. My apologies. Serena. Do you know Serena? Is she?
I do. Oh. Yeah, I do. I believe she is a survivor as well, and she has a very powerful story as well. So,
well, good. Thank you for watching, Serena. And now I do want to bring up this comment, and then we'll work our way through this. Apollo just bought your book. Sending so much love for your strength, wisdom, your passion for justice, Dawn. And Apollo, first of all, thank you for your support as always for the show, but actually buying the book. But I do want to share that we were actually going to offer, if folks wanted a signed copy of the book, that you can request one and work it out with Dawn. You can buy it directly from her. So I don't know, Apollo, if you can cancel it, or if it's Amazon, you can return it. But if you do want a signed copy of the book, if you see the ticker on the bottom, I'm going to ask you to type "the blue flower curtain" in the chat. If you type that with a hashtag, "the blue flower curtain," we'll make sure to connect with you and get your address and get that signed copy to you. If you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, it's really easy to do that. I'm going to keep an eye on Instagram as well. If you're not in a place where you can type into the chat, we've got you. Don't worry about it. We'll share Dawn's email address a little bit later in the show so you can get your copy. But if you're interested in getting a signed copy, go ahead. We'd love to get one to you. And Apollo has already done the needful, putting it in the chat. And we'll figure out what to do with your other copy, Apollo, if you can return it, etc. But thank you for jumping on that to get that book. So I gave that. I wanted to make sure we got that in before we kept going with the conversation. I was going to ask you, in terms of the technique that you used in terms of writing the book, the going back and forth in time. Now, this is your first. Well, it's not your first book. In fact, you actually wrote a book before this, which was not published, a children's book, right?
Yep.
this is your first published book, your first, I don't want to say real book, but significant,
Yep.
substantive. Did you before? So first of all, when did you? I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions.
Yep.
When did you decide you wanted to write a book about this experience?
I think it was probably 10 years ago when I had been doing Denim Day for a couple years, and I won an award, and somebody had said to me, your story's really like compelling. You should write a book, or do a movie. It was like, you should write a book or do a movie. And like my first thought was, who on earth is going to want to read something about a situation that's like so horrendous, right? And then I talked to a couple of confidants that I had, and people reminded me that lots of people like to watch crime dramas on television and real crime, and that people are kind of it's something that people are very curious about, not in a morbid kind of way, but just kind of like people are curious about the details of really brutal crimes like this. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it was about 10 years ago that I started writing, just journaling and writing things down that I thought that I might want to include if I ever wrote a book.
Okay. And then, the book came out last September. So about
Correct.
10 years from idea to getting it done.
Yep.
Did you take any classes on writing a book? Did you read about what you should do? You just
I did
started.
not.
You just started writing, putting pen to
I
paper,
did.
so to speak?
I did. I actually have. I ran across. I just sold my house last year, and as I was going through things, I ran across a copy of the first edition I ever wrote of my book that was handwritten on spiral notebook paper that I had actually pulled out. I wrote it in like this small spiral notebook, so it was like the size of a book. And I had pulled all the pages out and I had stapled them together. And oh my gosh, it's horrible. It's awful. Like, it is absolutely awful. Like, what was I thinking at the time when I was writing it? And so I just, I think I had done many versions of it before I actually felt like I understood the way in which I wanted to write it. And I wanted to write it almost as a fiction. So like a not true book, like you'd start reading it and you wouldn't realize that it was a true story until you were like, part of the way in, which again, like I say lots of things up front so everybody knows that it's a true story. But I wanted to write it in a way that it would be compelling for people to continue to read it.
So let's talk a little bit more about the story, and then we'll come back to the book. You talked about the actual incident. You found this woman's. You found the blue flower curtain, and thought to yourself, okay, a woman must live there. That she might offer some support, some help, some bit of safety, some bit of a refuge, and you go through the the police are called and they're in the house. It's chaotic, and then you go through that initial aftermath where you are being bombarded with questions from authority figures and people in uniform, and you have people who are saying things to you, accusing you, questioning kind of why you were doing what, when, where, etc. That experience really, I mean, not just, wasn't just traumatic. It wasn't just a kind of a follow up trauma, but it really motivated you to pursue a lifetime of advocacy. Not right away, of course. There's a long period of time before you get to that point. But can you talk a little bit about, what exactly happened, and how that motivated you to be an advocate?
Yeah. So, I, when all of this happened to me, like right after all of this happened to me, I thought, what a horrible thing to happen to somebody. Um, Never once between the time that this was happening and the time that the first responder showed up did I think, man, I should have done stuff completely different. Like this was this was my fault. Never thought that until the first responder showed up. And when the first responder showed up, the very first thing that he said to me was, "Why are you wearing a robe? And why did you drink a glass of water? You probably ruined the only evidence we'll have." And I immediately was taken aback and thought, oh my God, what did I do? Like, and oftentimes when I'm sharing my story publicly, I will say that, I had gravel and dirt in my mouth, and that glass of water was an absolute godsend. I was naked and embarrassed, and that robe was the absolute thing I needed in that moment to not feel so exposed. So I would do that all over again if the circumstances were the same, regardless of whether I messed up their evidence or I didn't. Because in that moment, that's what I needed to feel better. And in that moment, I needed to feel better. Um, but that was the first in a series of victim blaming statements that I've heard my entire life. And a lot of them are unintentional. Good friends have said to me, I would have ran away. I would have tried to fight them. I would have never let that happen to me. And my response is oftentimes, you have no idea what you are going to do in a situation like that. All I knew in that moment was that I wanted to survive. That's all I knew. I thought about my mom, I thought about my family, and I just didn't want to die. And so I was going to do absolutely everything that I could possibly do to stay alive. And that meant that they had guns. And somebody had the audacity to say to me, well, if you're running away from a gun, it's a lot harder to get shot. Like, those are the types of things like people don't think. And I don't mind when people ask me questions about it. I don't mind talking about it. But I often say, like, if I share my story with you, the first thing that I need you to say is, I am so sorry that happened to you. Like, before you ask me any questions, before you say anything else, if you lead in with, I'm really sorry that happened to you, then I can take a deep breath and I can answer any questions that you have after that. But if your first thing was, well, what were you wearing to this party? Or were you drunk? Or, why were you in that neighborhood? Thank you, Neil. I get defensive and I clam up, and then I don't want to tell you anything because you've now placed the blame on me. And as I often say, I did enough self-blaming for the entire world. It took me many, 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 many years to take all of that doubt that I had about things that I could have done differently and put them up on a shelf. And that's where they stay. until somebody unintentionally blames me again. And then that box comes tumbling off that shelf, and all of those self-doubt pieces fall in the ground, and it takes me weeks to pick them all back up, put them all back in the box, and put that box back up on the shelf. So my advocacy work is really around victim blaming and how difficult it is for someone who has been assaulted to feel like it's their fault. And I promise you, promise, I don't care what your circumstances are. The only person's fault it is the perpetrator. 100%. You are never, ever, ever to blame. I don't care if you were at a party. I don't care if you were drinking. I don't care if you were in a neighborhood. I don't care. The only person to blame is the perpetrator, period.
Absolutely.
There's my soapbox.
That's perfectly fine. I hope I put the words in because I wanted to actually say the words. If I haven't, that I am sorry this happened to you. And I can only hope that you know that everything that I do, from finally getting to read the book, but promoting it, talking about it, doing this show, those are all the ways that I know how to say I'm sorry, to show my support, to give you the love that you deserve in spades. But I'm not the only one. I want to. My mom, just after you had said that, also said, "Dawn, sorry to hear your sad story." And she's watching from Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. Our friend Paula Kiger is also watching. She's in Valdosta, Georgia. Thank you, Dawn, for your candor and courage. We all appreciate you. And of course, I want to give a shout out to Paula. She is watching in the middle of big family news. She had her second granddaughter was born just, I think, a week, if not 2 weeks ago. So she's helping taking care of at least the older one, who is a toddler. Maybe I don't know if she's with the alone with the infant just yet, but she has her hands full. Paula, thank you so much for taking the time to watch while you're doing that. Jonathan has a comment, and I'm just going to take the banner off so that the ticker off a little bit lower on the much lower end of the scale. Okay, I was jumped by, I didn't read the comment first, so I'm kind of seeing it as it goes. I was jumped by two men for reasons unknown. I fought them off. I rarely, if ever, talk about it because I found that for the most part, there was no real interest in my experience, but rather in using my experience as a jumping off point for whatever absurd point or judgment they wish to make. Jonathan, first of all, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's, one of these things about this show and shows like this, and this one in particular, because we talk about some very substantive, very personal issues. I've known Jonathan now for several years. We've met. I want to say we've met in person once or twice, I think. He was a guest on a show that I hosted, but this is the first time that I'd ever heard this, Jonathan. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. I can only imagine. I know that there are a number of people who have been attacked and mugged, and have a similar type of reaction where they try to understand what happened, why, what did they do wrong, kind of blaming themselves. And one of the things that I want to make sure that we say explicitly is that there's no question about comparing one person's story to another. There's no that sense of, well, this isn't as important. Jonathan's saying it's on a lower end of the scale, but Jonathan, I want to kind of push back on that a little bit, because trauma is trauma, and whether or not someone thinks that your experience was not as bad as someone else's, or vice versa, it is very real for you. It's very, traumatic for you. In my own case, I try not to, and hopefully I don't. Dawn and I talk about our experiences with sexual abuse and assault. I use both phrases only to differentiate what my experience was from Dawn's experience, but that, I was abused by a neighbor when I was 7 years old. Um, I don't get into the fact that it wasn't violent and it wasn't a gunpoint. I wasn't shot. Dawn, you were actually shot. There was a bullet wound that you had to deal with. It doesn't do anyone any favors to try and compare or contrast. It's just it is what it is. It's a horrible, horrific. Oh my God, I'm so sorry it happened to you. That's the response.
Yeah. I call it leveling. Like there's no leveling. Like no one's experience is any worse or better than anybody else's. It's your experience. Like if it happened to you, it's your experience. So
Yeah. And Jonathan says we don't know whether it was a mugging. They ran off once they found out I was not fun. I will certainly look forward to catching up with you later, Jonathan, to expound on that. If when you were saying the other comment, you fought them off. I'm assuming maybe that was the fun they weren't expecting. But thank you for sharing that. Certainly appreciate it. So we have you talked about the advocacy work that came from the way that you were treated and really a response to that initial incident. Thinking about the book itself and getting back to the writing of the book, you started the idea 10 years ago, or the idea came to your mind really 10 years ago. You started working on notebooks, etc. At some point, did you kind of feel a spark that you felt kind of okay, wait, I'm really going to do this, and you kind of put it into overdrive? When did that happen, and what triggered that?
Yeah, I think it was probably the 25th anniversary of when I got raped. I had bits and pieces of stuff, and I remember I remember sitting down at my computer and just typing chapter 1. And I was like, "Oh, I put down chapter 1. This is a real thing. I'm going to write a chapter." And I spent many days sitting on a recliner chair in my living room just writing. And Neil, you've seen my blogs.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually a one-shot deal. I sit down, I write them, and I'm done. I will
Mm-hmm.
read them to Jim. I will make a few corrections to like grammar and sentence structure, but that's usually it. I'm done. That is not the case with writing a book. You don't get to just be done. There was so much editing and reworking, and bless my editor, Sydney. She was amazing. She rearranged chapters for me. She made sure my timeline was spot on, because at first I had like some chapters that were like in the wrong position, where if you read it, you'd be like, wait a minute, what?
Sure.
So she was amazing. She gave suggestions on, ways in which I could improve the content, or made wording suggestions. At one point in the book, I had fake names of people, and she was like, well, why don't we just say the husband, your companion, your best friend? That way you don't have to name people. I loved that idea, and I think it enhances the book so much more not having somebody's name in it.
Sure.
The only things that aren't edited are the transcripts. because they're transcripts. So everything that's in the transcripts comes directly from, or everything in the book that's from the transcripts is word for word.
Candace says, amen to that. Editing is the worst, but that editors and proofreaders are amazing to have in your corner. So
very true.
That's definitely good. The other thing that I wanted to ask about in terms of the writing is you were finished with the book last year. So when I say last year, September is when the book came out. So a year before that.
Yep.
The 30th anniversary is when you wanted to publish the book. How close to the end did you stop and hit pause on that?
So I thought I was done. And Jim and I sat down for me to read it out loud to him so that I could hear how it sounded and make sure that it flowed and did everything I was supposed to do. And as I was going through it, I wasn't satisfied. I got to the end and I wasn't satisfied. I felt like I needed more editing. But I also felt like there were gaps. There was a huge gap between the time that like I began to heal and like some of my advocacy work. And I had not filled in the space in between there. And there was a lot that, you know, I mean, my poor best friend, I was brutally horrible to her. And I really wanted to put something in because it's a testimony to how difficult trauma is, right? Like I absolutely didn't want anybody in my life. I just didn't want to be close to anybody in my life. And I think that had to do with just not being 100% sure that I was going to make it through this. And I didn't want to love anybody because if I were to have taken my own life, I didn't want anybody to be sad that I was gone. It sounds so like bizarre, but it's real. It's a real thing.
It's real.
And yeah, it is definitely real. And my best friend would just, she was relentless. She just would not let me walk away from her. And I'm so blessed by that. Because she is still my very, very best friend to this day. And, you know, I'm so glad that she didn't walk away because a lot of people did. I mean, I was horrible. I was horrible to be around. I was drinking all the time. I was on a self-destructive path. You know, my behaviors were so bad and so poor. Like I was just trying to not be alive. And so I never blamed anybody who stepped away from me during that time. It was really hard to be around me. And now I lost track of what your question was. Oh, I started filling in those gaps. And it took me a whole nother year and a whole nother set of editing until I felt completely proud of the work that I had done.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I might do a second edition because I have like 4 or 5 things that I wish I would have added in that I didn't add in.
Sure.
So
Sure.
but not I need a break. So
no, of course. And certainly, you know, I don't want it to go without saying, I want to explicitly say it that I wasn't questioning not having, you know, stopping it, not finishing it for the 30th anniversary. I was just curious about what that process was like. So going back to your story though, I actually, I want to ask you about the break in the case, because when you were attacked by these young boys, 13 to 17 years of age, there in the immediate aftermath, there was no indication as to who the perpetrators were.
correct.
The detectives were lost. And one day there was a phone call,
Yep. Yep. I got a phone call. And I write about it in the book. You would think it was like the best day of my life. And ultimately, yes. But I knew that there was so much that was going to happen after they found them, and that I was going to have to be a part of, and then I was terrified about that. But the young girl who was standing on the porch talking to these boys, um, she realized a couple of weeks after that the detectives had come to her house and they had interviewed her parents and her, and she had not put those two things together, like that these boys were the same boys that she had been talking to on this porch. And one day she was like headed to school and she realized that she thought she knew who these boys were. And so she went home and they got the card for the detective, and her mom took her down to the police station, and she told them who she thought the boys were. And it was a boy that she had gone to school, she was in high school with. And once they got that boy, he gave up the other two boys.
And so we'll hold that thought for just a minute, because my mom, who's watching, so the Parek, must be very difficult to write a story in the form of a book. You relive the whole situation. And so you're, even today, as you're talking about it and thinking about it, obviously everything is coming up. This woman who, this girl, this teenage girl who went to the detectives, that had the business card. 31 years later, you received an email.
I did. Yes. I happened to be in Hawaii with my husband on my honeymoon, and I got a Facebook instant message from the woman who was the teenager at the time, who said, I saw you reading a portion of your book on TikTok, and that girl in the book that you talk about is me. And she was gonna be on the show today, but she was very, very sick. She's had upper respiratory infection for like 3 weeks, and she just said she could barely talk, and it was just, she was struggling. But yeah, my heart was just like pounding. I couldn't believe it. And the reason I know that she went to the detectives is because she told me in this email just recently. So that isn't even in my book, because I didn't know. I just knew that she had gone to the police and told them what she knew. So
just incredible. Just incredible. I can only imagine what that would have been like to read that email and kind of put two and two together. I mean, what an experience. For folks who may have joined us late, when we finish the show, we will go a little bit longer. I'm watching the clock. We do our best to try and finish in an hour, but this is too good of a conversation, Dawn. And the only thing, I hate to be standing between you and dinner, but we're going to push just a little bit. But my name is Neil Parek. I am usually the co-host of the show. Today, I am the producer and sole host. Dawn is usually my co-host, but she's the guest. Dawn Helmrich Neuburg is talking about her book, The Blue Flower Curtain, which is available if you are interested in getting a signed copy of the book. We mentioned, we suggested that you put in the hashtag The Blue Flower Curtain in the chat. If you're not able to put that in the chat, depending on if you're just listening or if you're on a different platform, etc., if you send an email to Dawn, and the email address is theblueflowercurtain@gmail.com, theblueflowercurtain@gmail.com. She'll get you a signed copy. You'll figure out payment, etc. But we certainly want to facilitate that for you. Apollo already earlier in the episode put in the hashtag the Blue Flower Curtain in the chat. So we'll follow up, Apollo, and wait to get that to you. But I wanted to make sure people know that. The other thing that we want to share, and we talk about data and statistics a lot on this show, in reference to this experience. Dawn, your work as a with United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County, I like working that in whenever I can. It focuses on data and metrics. So one of the things we want to share with people is this stat from RAIN, which says out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 975 perpetrators will walk free. If you can't read the detail, if you're watching on your phone, potentially, only 310 are even reported to the police. 50 lead to an arrest. 28 lead to a felony conviction. And 25 of these perpetrators are incarcerated. 25 out of 1,000 in terms of the numbers. And Dawn, in that sense, I do not want to use the word lucky, but your story was in that, very small percentage, 2.5%, if I'm doing my math right. That is pretty significant, pretty unique.
Yeah, it really is. A lot of times when people are like, wow, you really, you're okay with talking about this. And I honestly believe that the reason that I have a voice is because what happened to me and the circumstances are very, very rare. Most people are not raped by a stranger or strangers. They aren't, people aren't jumping out from behind bushes and my story is tellable because of the circumstances. A lot of people are raped by someone they know. Mm-hmm. They might be molested as a child by a grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle or cousin or brother, neighbor. They might be raped by a boyfriend or girlfriend. They might have circumstances where they're married and being raped by a spouse, where it is not as easy to report or tell. I didn't really have a choice. I mean, I was injured and naked and I needed help. There was no other place for me to go but to the police, right? That is not always the case. Most of the people that I know who have disclosed to me that they were molested as young children, they didn't want the perpetrator to get in trouble. They just wanted the abuse to stop.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm in a very unique position to be able to share my circumstances and speak loud and often about something that a lot of people can't do, and they can't share their stories. Sometimes they can't even, I've had people reach out to me on Facebook instant message and say, I can't even, like during the Me Too movement, I had multiple people who said, I can't even put Me Too on my Facebook status because I'm Facebook friends with my perpetrator. And I think we have to be really cognizant of that. I think that's just a really important thing to understand, that not everyone has the opportunity like I do to share their story.
Sure. I want to remind folks that April is actually Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and that's why we're focusing on this story for this episode, and that coming up in just a little bit is an event called Denim Day. And if you're not familiar with Denim Day, it is a an event that takes place. It's a global event, and in fact, this is what Dawn and I first connected on. I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. This is the Denim Day MKE website, Denim Day Milwaukee. Dawn actually brought Denim Day to Milwaukee. It'll be held April 30th this year. I think the story is worth sharing if people aren't familiar with it. In Italy, 30 years ago now?
More than that, 1998, I think it was. Or
98?
Yeah, 98.
A woman was raped, and there was a conviction in the court, but it was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the justices actually overturned the decision. And their reasoning was that because she was wearing tight jeans, her attacker told her to take them off so he could rape her, and she complied. And they said that counted as consent, and so overturned the conviction. The next day, members of the women legislators in Parliament wore jeans in protest. And it started a movement where people wear denim on a particular day in April during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Dawn brought this event to Milwaukee and has been closely involved with it for a number of years. I was actually there 2 years ago for the Hope Shining Blue event. Our friend Candice won an award there. You had won the award several years before. But I was there for the press conference and other events around that, which was an incredible honor. I also tried to spread the word about Denim Day within the United Way network when I was working at United Way, getting local United Ways to recognize the day and getting our United Way worldwide team to recognize it as well. That's why, with teal being the color for sexual assault awareness, Dawn and I are both wearing our teal today, and it is something that, at least in Milwaukee, I don't know if is it nationwide in terms of the teal ribbon?
Yep, that's the teal ribbon.
Milwaukee does a great job of painting the town teal, the bridges, buildings, etc., lighting up the sky, and so I wanted to share that with you as well. Dawn, the idea of writing the book, the idea of getting it out there, but then also to continually tell that story is really incredible. Candice has a quick question. First of all, it takes a big person to admit, what you said earlier. But how did you feel about reading it out loud? And is there an audiobook in your future? Candice might want to talk to you about that. But so incredibly proud to be on this journey with you, crying happy tears, hearing you speak about all of this, stepping into your season. I'm here for all of it. How does it feel to read it out loud? Not just talk about it, but to read the book.
So reading it out loud was, I choked up, teared up quite a few times during the time when I was reading it. Sometimes it's like, it's one of those things where it's kind of surreal, where I'm like, yeah, that happened to me. Like that's my story. And sometimes that can be really surreal to think or to acknowledge. I have every intention of doing an audiobook. I have to find the right, well, maybe I just found it, Candice. But I have to find the right pathway to be able to do that, especially because I grew up in theater and I want to read my own audiobook. I don't want somebody else to read it for me. And so yeah, that's my intention. Definitely
that was going to be my question, is whether you'll read it yourself. I certainly hope you do.
Yeah.
Apollo shared that this was beautiful and be well. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Candice says I'm here to help with that. So I'm sure that will be incredible. If you joined us late, as soon as we're done, you'll be able to watch the show from the beginning on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on my website. So we want to make sure you do that. Our next show is going to be April 24th, and that's when we're going to switch roles. Dawn is already thinking about how she's going to do that. So this is what it's going to look like when we do that. I'll be the producer and guest, and Dawn will be the host. We are going to talk about what I learned, what I've learned about my own mental health over the last year plus that we've been doing the show. And as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be in advance of Mental Health Awareness Month in May. So I'm looking forward to that. There, I'll just share that it's been an incredible journey for me. As I've mentioned to folks, I never would have said anything about the fact that I saw a therapist or that I experienced anxiety, suffer from anxiety or occasional depression. And now I'm talking about it at receptions and cocktail hours and with people that I've barely met. I mention it to clients sometimes in an appropriate context. But 2 weeks from today, I'm going to be sharing some things that I've actually never shared before with anyone. And I've shared quite a bit, actually. I mean, we've talked about the abuse history. We've talked about the mental health. We've talked about suicidal ideation, which, as things go, those are some of the most sensitive things. But for folks who are watching and or might be watching the replay, I'll leave you with this. In last fall, I was diagnosed with adult ADHD, and it's taken me several months to wrap my head around it and to figure out what that means and how that plays out for me. But the most important thing that I've learned is that it's not that I have anxiety and depression. I have ADHD, and that's led to anxiety and depression. And so I have to reframe how I think about myself and kind of the world around me. And I have 2 weeks to figure out how I'm going to talk about it, because I haven't talked about it yet until now, putting in this little teaser. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing, Dawn. And Candace says, great show. Happy I tuned in. We're happy to, Candace. And with any luck, I will see you in June. I'm this close to saying that I'll definitely be there. I need to do some math and figure out some timing stuff on my end, but I hope to be there for a conference that Candace is organizing for survivors in June, and I hope to be a part of that. So thank you. And Jonathan says wonderful show as well. With that, we will wish you a good night, and hopefully we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.